All right, everybody. Welcome to the Rivers Coalition meeting for March. We're glad that you're here. We got about 48 participants on the phone now. I expect a few probably still logging in. This month, we're going to be covering a good subject that a lot of us have been participating in. That's the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual that's being developed as an update to the LOR's 2008 Lake Okeechobee schedule. And we have with us members of the Corps of Engineers to give us a special presentation. So we have if you have Zoom functions, we ask you stay on mute if you could until you're ready to speak or asking a question. And if you want to, under the chat function, which is if you scroll on your screen under full screen, down at the bottom is a chat, C-H-A-T. You can click on that and type in a question there, and or a link or other kind of information to go to everybody. And that way we all see questions coming up and we can direct them that way. If you're calling in on the phone, we'll try to recognize everybody if we have questions after the presentation. And of course, our agenda, you can see, I'll talk about our government activities and functions, and then we'll go from there to our Rivers Coalition updates. We are really pleased to see everybody today, and thanks for participating. We've got a special presentation, as I said, by the Corps of Engineers. I'll introduce Timothy Gysan. He's the Senior Project Manager for the LOSOM process for the Corps. He's joined by Savannah Lacy, who's the Lake Okeechobee Water Manager. And he also has a part of the team, Corps of Engineers team is Erica Schulte and also Kim Taplin. Kim Taplin, who's been with the Corps for a long time, knows our local area well. So Tim, we're excited that you're here. You know, the water quality is looking okay. We've been since the beginning of March. A lot of concern, of course, because we have the harmful algal bloom deviation going on since the beginning of March 6th. And we're obviously concerned as how LOSOM proceeds and goes forward. So I'm glad you could join us. Thanks for joining us. And we'll look forward here now to your presentation. So welcome, Tim.
Great, thanks. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get going. All right, can everybody see the screen?
Yeah,
looks
perfect.
Good. Great.
All right, perfect. All right, so as Mark mentioned, my name is Tim Gysan. I'm Senior Project Manager with the Corps of Engineers. Been with the Corps for, gosh, almost 21 years now. Started off in engineering for 16 years, working on SERP and other projects, and then transitioned up to project management in 2016 to start trying to lead some of these projects. Been a lot of fun over the last 21 years, I'll say that for sure, getting to work on these great projects that we have here in Florida and getting to work with all of our great stakeholders. So what I wanted to do is to give an overview of LOSOM to start off, and then talk about a couple of other projects that are related to flows into Lake Okeechobee in the Kissimmee River restoration, as well as the Lake Okeechobee watershed restoration project. And then Savannah is going to talk about some of our current Lake Okeechobee operations, and then we'll open up for questions after that. There we go. All right, to start off kind of big picture, that as everyone probably knows, the Lake Okeechobee is governed operations by a operating manual. And the operating manual basically tells the operators of the structures how to make releases during different times of the year. The Lake Okeechobee operations are part of a much bigger operating manual, which covers all of South Florida and all of the Central and Southern Florida project, and that's called our System Operating Manual. The Lake Okeechobee operations are included in Volume 3 of that manual. I don't know if you can see the hand on here on the screen or not.
Yeah,
This is
that's
the
okay.
area that volume covers. Okay. So the LOSOM effort will be updating the operations for Lake Okeechobee that are contained in this volume 3 of this much bigger system operating manual. I know it gets a little confusing there, but basically LOSOM will be incorporated in volume 3 of this bigger effort for all operations within South Florida. The slide that we have up here is related to Herbert Hoover Dike construction. And why is that important? Well, the completion of the Herbert Hoover Dike construction allows us to implement a new operating schedule for Lake Okeechobee, which is why we are undertaking the LOSOM effort at this time. So we're prepared with the new schedule once Herbert Hoover Dike construction is complete. As you can see, everything in green on here are completed construction projects, and the yellow on this side and some of these culverts here are ongoing work. All of this work is scheduled to be completed by the end of 2022, so the end of next year, which is why our LOSOM process is also scheduled to end next year. So once construction is complete on Herbert Hoover Dike, we've got a new schedule ready to go for Lake Okeechobee. So as a reminder, I know a lot of folks have been involved in LOSOM, many since the beginning, but just a quick overview to remind everyone kind of what our study goals are and what are the objectives of LOSOM. So overall, what we want to end up with is a flexible Lake Okeechobee schedule, which allows us to not only address changing conditions within the system, but also balance our congressionally authorized purposes. And those congressionally authorized purposes are for flood control, enhancement of fish and wildlife, recreation, water supply, and navigation, all related to Lake Okeechobee. Our specific study objectives, which we developed as a PDT, are to manage risk, public health and safety, life and property. And many of these have sub-objectives. So some of the sub-objectives under that managing risk objective are specific to dam safety, algal bloom risk in Lake Okeechobee, as well as algal bloom risk in the northern estuaries. So this is really kind of the first operation study that the Corps has done, at least in the state of Florida, to really look at algal bloom risk and how operations can potentially positively affect that risk for downstream waters. Objective 2 is to continue to meet our authorized purposes for navigation, recreation, and flood control. Objective 3 is to improve water supply performance, and that goes for not only users of Lake Okeechobee, but those in the downstream receiving areas as well. And Objective 4, which is to enhance ecology in Lake Okeechobee, the northern estuaries, and across the South Florida ecosystem. You can imagine that these are all grand objectives that I think we can get to as we work together to try to come up with this new lake schedule. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you all about is kind of the different stakeholder views that we've heard throughout this process from different parts of the system. As you can imagine, with a system this big, not everybody has the same goals or needs when it comes to how we manage Lake Okeechobee. And I think everybody has done a really good job throughout this process in participating and kind of making their concerns and needs known. But I wanted to kind of highlight those specifically today so everybody kind of has an understanding of some of the other parts of the system. I think obviously everybody here understands what is desired for St. Lucie Estuary. And the Corps is definitely well aware of that as well. So starting kind of with the top of the system, and I'll go through each of these on this slide. Starting with the Kissimmee Basin and the chain of lakes, obviously we've heard concerns with flood risk, habitat, and of course inflow into Lake Okeechobee. One of the things I know that is of concern is storing more water within the Kissimmee Basin and how that affects, especially within the chain of lakes, how that affects the people that live around the lakes is of concern to them. That, of course, is outside of our purview within LOSOM to do anything within the Kissimmee Basin. But of course, the inflow into Lake Okeechobee from the Kissimmee Basin is of extreme concern and influence to what we do with Lake Okeechobee. Within Lake Okeechobee itself and the area surrounded by Herbert Hoover Dike, big concerns, of course, with dam safety and flood protection for those communities around the lake, but also the health of the lake is extremely important to the folks that live around there, not only for recreation, but for their own human health and for water supply. On the Caloosahatchee side of the house, a lot of the same concerns that the folks in the St. Lucie estuary have. The health of the river and the estuary itself, concerns with algal bloom risk, and of course with the Caloosahatchee, concern with providing the needed dry season flows. Down to the south of the lake, multiple different purposes, one of which being the Everglades ecosystem, the concern with the habitat and species down to the south and getting the water that they need. One of the big requests that we've heard throughout this process is to increase flows to the south for multiple project purposes. Down at the bottom of the system in Florida Bay, which is the ultimate receiver of all the water that flows through the system, is the salinity of the bay itself and getting more water down there to try to help prevent some of that saltwater intrusion into the marsh and mangrove communities. Down in South Dade, of course, is the desire to increase flows into the Everglades National Park, but also preserve flood protection within the system and balance the water for aquifer protection to prevent saltwater intrusion. Also, all around the lake, there's multiple municipal, industrial, tribal, and agricultural users which want to see an increase in water supply performance from the schedule. We've also heard a lot of concerns to balance the needs throughout the system, make sure we honor the tribal water compacts and the existing permits, as well as concerns with seasonal demand changes based on climate and weather changes. Then, of course, ending with the St. Lucie estuary, as you all are very familiar with the concerns on this side of the system, obviously the riverine and estuarine health related to flows coming out of Lake Okeechobee, concerns with algal bloom risk, salinity, and of course the overriding comment that we've heard throughout the process is to minimize or really eliminate freshwater flows from Lake Okeechobee to the estuary. Hopefully that provides a little bit of context for the different views of stakeholders throughout the area that is influenced by Lake Okeechobee operations, and highlights a little bit of the challenge that we as the Corps face with trying to balance all of these needs and all of the desires from the different stakeholder groups around the lake. As I said, we really appreciate everybody's involvement throughout this process and the really productive discussions we've had in a lot of our meetings. The more I think we talk as a whole, it's all part of the South Florida system and all beneficiaries of the water resources that we enjoy, the better off we'll all be at the end of this process. All right, getting to the overall LOSOM schedule, this is really high level, and I'll get into some more of the details in the next several slides, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the overall process where we started back at the end of 2018 and where we'll end in October of 2022. We're currently in the alternative evaluation phase of the process, which we've been in for, I guess, the last 7 or 8 months, starting with the conceptual plan evaluations, and now in iteration 1 evaluations where we are right now. Highlight some of the milestones. First 2 we've already passed. Like I said, we're currently in the evaluation of alternative lake schedules, which will end by the end of September of this year. The special date to highlight here is the selection of a tentatively selected lake schedule in July of this year. Moving on from our next kind of milestone will be the release of the draft NEPA document, which we've got scheduled for the end of January of next year. And that will be an opportunity for everyone to review the EIS and the lake schedule and operating criteria that go with that and provide additional input. A final document release in July of next year, and then finally the approval at South Atlantic Division of the new operating plan by the end of October of 2022. So a lot of work still to go to get us to the end of this and get us to the point where we have an approved lake schedule that we can implement once Herbert Hoover Dike construction is complete. This slide is an overview of the alternative evaluation process. So the phase that we're in is highlighted on the last slide. These are the details. We've already completed step 1, step 2. We're currently in step 3, which is the iteration 1 analysis. Everybody should have access to all of the data from the model runs that were done. Those were posted earlier this month. I'll get into some more of the details on exactly what this part of the process looks like on the next slide. But just the high level date is May the 7th. That's a little over 6 weeks from now, 7 weeks from now, is when we want to have a balanced array of schedules that we can run through our models. And again, the selection date for the schedule that we want to carry forward is mid-July of this year. So we've got a little bit of time to get there, but a lot of work to do to get us to a point where we've got a schedule that we feel good about moving forward with. The last step of this process, of course, is once we have that recommended schedule, is to do some optimizations that will allow us to kind of tweak that schedule to make it perform even better, as well as development of some of the detailed operating criteria that maybe aren't easily modeled within the process. So there's a lot of opportunity within this process to help create the criteria that we use to operate, not just the schedule itself. And we'll get into more of that as we move through the process. All right, so iteration 1, I just wanted to go over the alternative schedules that were included in iteration 1, just as a reminder for everyone. And I do want to remind everyone that these are all schedules that were geared towards one of the sub-objectives. These are not meant to be balanced schedules. These were still meant to kind of focus on one of the sub-objectives and provide the full suite of model data. I think the conceptual plan modeling that we did only used one of our modeling tools, which allowed us to do the 120,000 model runs that we have talked about before. The full suite of modeling tools would have been much more cumbersome to try to do a process like that. So this suite of model runs that we have utilizes all 3 of our modeling tools and has all of the performance measure output, as well as all of the hydrologic data, raw data outputs, the stages and flows for all of the structures in canals and different parts of the system. So this data that we've got now posted includes 2 base condition runs. So our existing condition baseline based on 2019, or our current condition, a no action plan or our future condition, which represents the physical structural aspects of the system in 2025. So those are our 2 base conditions that we can compare results to. We have our 9 plans that are based on, or 8 plans based on the sub-objectives, and again, the specific plans are geared towards performance of each of those sub-objectives. And again, those are algal bloom risk for the northern estuaries, navigation, recreation, water supply, ecology in Lake Okeechobee, ecology in the Caloosahatchee estuary, ecology in the St. Lucie estuary, and ecology in South Florida. And then we also have 5 additional runs which are included in iteration 1. So we have 2 plans that were required by the WRDA 2020 for the Corps to evaluate. The first plan looks at prohibiting lake releases from S308 and S80 into the St. Lucie estuary. And the second evaluates implications of prohibiting high volume releases to the west to the Caloosahatchee estuary through S77, S78, and S79. And then we also had 3 stakeholder groups which submitted plans for consideration in the LOSOM process. One submitted by Audubon, one submitted by the Everglades Foundation, and a third submitted by conglomerate of Glades-Hendry counties and Clewiston and Moorhaven. So I won't get into any of the details of that model data. Jessica Mallet did a really good job of that Monday at our PDT meeting. So hopefully everybody was able to sign into that. And if not, that presentation was sent out to everyone yesterday. All right, the details of what we're doing within iteration 1. So I know this is a little crazy looking flow chart. It actually has 2 separate pieces, one that goes this way and one that goes this way. Both sides meet up with a PDT meeting or workshop, or a PDT meeting in April to go over balanced plans. So we'll start with this top part of the flow chart, and that was to gather information on flexibility and memory within the system. What were some of the key decision points or key metrics that would be useful in incorporating memory into our plan? Something that we haven't really done on a extensive basis to this point, is kind of looking at not only where we are right now, but where have we been over the last several years? What conditions within the system have we seen, and how can those help us to make better decisions when we're looking at lake releases, as well as what are some of the things we want to look at as we project upcoming conditions that will help us make better management decisions. So all of that information, which we're still trying to finalize, some of the input that we've gotten on that will help us develop balanced plans as we move forward. The second part of that process, starting here on the bottom, is the actual iteration 1 model data. As I mentioned, that was posted on March the 12th and is available for everyone to take a look at and provide any feedback that you would have on those modeled plans. We held a PDT meeting earlier this week to go over that model data, and Jessica Mallet did a really good job of providing kind of a high-level overview of that data. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be engaging in quite a few sub-team meetings for all of our different sub-teams to go through the evaluation of that data, looking at what are the most important performance metrics that we would use as we're evaluating plans, performance that we like out of not only these plans, but going back to the conceptual plans and the 27,000 model runs that we did, looking at that data to see if there are performances that we're seeing that we'd like to look at in more detail that could be part of a balanced plan. All of that will be leading up to a workshop that we're looking to schedule April the 12th to get everybody together, to have the sub-teams present out on what they've found in their evaluations of the iteration 1 data, as well as going back to the conceptual plan. and getting everyone together to kind of talk about the performance from a balanced plan that we'd like to see and where we may be able to compromise on performance to be able to provide benefit for everyone. I think that's going to be a really good discussion, getting all of our different stakeholder groups together to really kind of hash out what a really beneficial plan would look like for everyone. We'll take all of that information as well as everything we've heard up to this point in the process and develop some preliminary balanced plans for everyone to look at. That development will be done kind of in the background and by the Corps and some other folks at the Water Management District and other technical folks that can really help us build the schedules. And we'll bring those schedules to the PDT and to all of our stakeholders and go through those in detail, starting the week of April the 21st. Between that time and when we select the actual plans for the balanced array, the plan will be to engage the PDT as a whole and work through the details on balanced plans, things that we want to try to change to make the plans work better, things that we think maybe wouldn't work as well, and really kind of iron out some of the details in the balanced plans as a PDT. Then ultimately, the iteration 1 process will end with the selection of the iteration 2 or balanced array of plans. And those are the plans that we'll actually evaluate to see which would be most beneficial for all of our stakeholders and which will end up being the basis of the next Lake Okeechobee schedule. So again, that date is May the 7th to have those balanced schedules developed and ready to go to our modeling team. As you can see throughout this process, there are lots of opportunities for public involvement. As we've done throughout this LOSOM process, we think it's very important to involve all of our stakeholders and give everybody a chance to really be part of this process and really understand the values that everyone within the state has. All right, so that ends my LOSOM portion of the presentation. So I wanted to move into a couple of the projects that really influence the water coming into Lake Okeechobee. And why is that important? Because the water comes into the lake much faster than we can get it out. Obviously, all of the changes that were made as part of the Central and Southern Florida project to provide flood control and water supply for the residents in the state of Florida has drastically altered the ecosystems and the way water moves throughout the entire South Florida system. So anything we can do north of the lake that helps kind of restore some of the natural timing and volume of flow into the lake allows us a lot more flexibility in how we then distribute that water to different parts of the system, whether it be for environmental water supply or for flood protection or for municipal users. North of the lake storage is extremely important to providing that flexibility. And the couple of projects that we'll talk about help with the operational flexibility that I think we all kind of seek in giving us a better opportunity to manage the system. So starting off with the Kissimmee River restoration, this effort has been going on since literally the early 1970s, right after the flood control project was completed. We're getting very close to completion of the construction part of the Kissimmee River restoration. We have our last two construction projects that will complete the physical restoration of the Kissimmee River system. The first is contract 12A, which is this S69 weir and completion of backfill within the lower part of the Kissimmee reaches. This project not only restores floodplain, but then also provides with the weir that you see here in this picture. It maintains the ultimate flood protection for the folks upstream. This project is scheduled to be completed in June of this year. And then the second ongoing construction project is backfill and restoration within Reach 2, which is just north of this area in Reach 3. So this is one of the middle reaches and actually the longest reach of restoration within the Kissimmee project. This is also scheduled to be complete in June of this year. We'll restore about 9 miles of floodplain and meandering river channel. So big picture, construction will be complete on the restoration features this year, scheduled for June. So once the physical restoration of the Kissimmee is completed, the next step is to restore the hydrology or flow of water through the system. And that's done through implementation of the headwaters regulation schedule for Lake Kissimmee. And that schedule will allow us to hold more water within Lake Kissimmee to then distribute it during the drier times when it's required for the floodplain, as well as to maintain the flow within the historic Kissimmee River. The headwaters schedule will be implemented in increments. So we won't be going from our current schedule up to the full headwaters schedule right away. We're going to go in at least a couple of increments to slowly allow the system to come to equilibrium in between different schedules. And also to ensure that we are maintaining our flood risk reduction requirements, as well as to make any adjustments in not only the operations, but any of the structures to ensure that we're fully meeting the hydrologic requirements for the project. And then we'll fully see the restoration response from the ecology once this is complete. It should be noted that the bulk of the environmental benefits will be expected once the full hydrology is restored. So once we have the full headwater schedule in place, as well as the other operating criteria for other structures in the system. The physical restoration or with construction definitely provides a lot of benefit, and we're seeing a really good trajectory of the ecosystem response at this point. But we'll need that full hydrology restored as well to really see the envisioned benefits for the full project. A couple of things I want to kind of highlight that maybe everyone hasn't heard before, and it was really what's the effect of the Kissimmee River restoration on inflows to Lake Okeechobee. So I think that's really where interest for most of the downstream stakeholders comes, is how is this work north of the lake really going to benefit the rest of us? So as I mentioned, a lot of the inflow into Lake Okeechobee, approximately 60%, comes from the Kissimmee Basin. Since the CNSF construction was complete, water flows into the lake 6 times faster than it can be released, which makes a really challenging effort for our water managers like Savannah to really operate and provide the benefits that everybody wants to see. The Kissimmee River restoration is expected to provide some benefits as far as the timing of water coming into the lake goes, which will provide more flexibility for our operators to make informed decisions for the downstream areas. So we expect, because of the restoration and being able to keep some more water on the floodplain and slow the movement of that water down coming into the lake, we'll see a change in the timing of the volume of water that moves from the Kissimmee Basin into the lake. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that the total volume of water is not expected to change dramatically. That water will still make its way into Lake Okeechobee, but the timing of when that water comes in and those peak flows will be changed, which is actually really important. Because it's a lot of those large storm events which cause the negative impacts that the folks see from lake releases. We do expect some small change in volume, but it's projected at only about 15,000 acre feet of water would be lost from the floodplain from evapotranspiration associated with the sheet flow. So we're not looking at a huge change in the volume of water that makes its way through the Kissimmee Basin into Lake Okeechobee. The restoration project also, it's not meant to provide a storage reservoir for water north of the lake. It is a restoration project itself, which is another reason we don't expect to see a large change in the volume of water making its way to the lake, just the timing, which is in itself very important. One last aspect that I think is important for everyone to understand is the nutrient reduction that may happen through uptake by floodplain vegetation. So we expect that there will be some ancillary benefit to the water quality of water coming into the lake from the basin, but we're not expecting that it's going to be a significant change in the water quality of waters flowing into the lake. So that's not the purpose of the restoration project. Its purpose is to restore the floodplain and the river ecosystems. Moving on from Kissimmee to the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project, which is a SERP project and contains several SERP components. The intent of this project is to be able to actually store more water north of the lake. That's one of the primary objectives for the Lake O watershed restoration. Again, the objectives for this SERP project were to improve the quantity, timing, and distribution of flows into Lake Okeechobee to help maintain the lake at more ecologically desired lake stages. We also, as an objective for LOP, wanted to improve the salinity regime and water quality for oysters, SAV, and other estuarine communities within the northern estuaries. So better managed releases from the lake to the estuaries. A third objective of the Lake O watershed restoration is to increase the extent and functionality of wetlands north of the lake. And finally, a fourth objective was to increase the availability of water supply for existing legal users. So where that project sits now, many of you probably saw a final project implementation report and EIS was released at the end of last summer for final review. That review, as well as a review of the draft report of the Chief of Engineers, so that's our leader up in DC, was completed at the end of October of last year. So since that time, the report itself has been under review at headquarters, and they have asked us to provide some additional supplemental information to assist in the final decision on how we're going to move forward with the Lake Oak project. There have been a lot of concerns raised with not only the total cost of the project, but the location of the above ground storage. So I should point out the features that are in the plan include 55 ASR wells scattered throughout the watershed, 2 wetland restoration projects at the Kissimmee River Center and Paradise Run, and then a wetland attenuation feature or shallow reservoir that would be located in the Indian Prairie subbasin here adjacent to the lake within historic Lake Littoral Zone, which would also have 25 co-located ASR wells. So I think it's good to kind of recognize the different functions of the features that are in this plan. So we have 2 kind of separate functions which really help us when we look at management of Lake Okeechobee. The first being the long-term storage of water that really enables us to make decisions on a seasonal or yearly basis. And those are the ASR wells. And the 55 watershed ASR wells plus the 25 that would be co-located with our above ground storage will really provide long-term storage underground, which would then be available when we get into drier times. And as we get into those situations when we have a kind of a low lake stage, and we're kind of at risk if we go much lower, we have a backup water supply, if you will. to be able to reduce the risk of lower lake stages, which we've heard a number of stakeholders really voice concern about. But those ASR wells are extremely important for long-term management and helping us on the low end of the lake schedule. Then the other function of the features within the LOSOM project are to help attenuate high flows coming into the lake and help us make more short-term management decisions on how we want to release water from the lake during high lake stages and during high flow events caused by large storms. So the above ground storage with this high volume intake would allow us to more flexibility in how we manage the lake during really wet times. So as I mentioned, there were definitely some concerns raised by stakeholders during the review process, as well as during the development of this plan on the overall cost, as well as the location of this wetland attenuation feature and its proximity to several communities downstream, as well as the Seminole Tribe's Brighton Reservation. So headquarters has asked us to provide some additional information to assist them in making a decision on the plan, and that information relates to a plan that would eliminate the above ground storage as well as the co-located ASR wells, and look at benefits of a plan that would include the watershed ASR wells as well as the wetland restoration projects. So we're in the process of prepping that information to get back to headquarters, and ultimately the Chief of Engineers will make a decision on our path forward on LOSOM. Some other things that are going on, as many of you know, the state of Florida appropriated $100 million for the South Florida Water Management District to move forward with development of the ASR portions of this plan. So the district, in coordination with the Corps, has developed a draft ASR science plan, which is meant to address uncertainties that were noted by the National Academies of Sciences during the review of the ASR regional study back in 2015. So that science plan, which includes a lot of experiments and field investigations to address those unknowns and uncertainties, was released for public review back in February. I think that review was extended to a 45-day review, which just ended. So we'll be moving forward with finalizing that science plan and start implementing some of those experiment field studies to start answering some of the uncertainties that the National Academies had. The Corps and the Water Management District executed what's called a PPCA, which is basically an agreement between the Corps and the Water Management District that they would be able to go ahead and move out with some of this work. And if we get an authorized project and sign a project partnership agreement, would be able to get credit for the work that they're doing. So as I mentioned, the district is moving out with efforts on ASR implementation, which include site exploration and preliminary design efforts, and several new contracts that were just awarded for this effort in the C38 or along the Kissimmee River in this area, as well as over here in the Taylor Creek Basin, to start some of the preliminary design work on ASR wells in these areas. So a lot of movement going on, a lot of really good science work going on, and definitely the district and the state are making really good progress on ASR implementation, which long-term is really going to help the flexibility we have within the system to manage the lake in a much, much better way. So with that, I'll turn the reins over to Savannah Lacy, our lead water manager for the Lake Okeechobee Basin, and she will talk to you about some of the current operations within the system. So Savannah?
Thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. And do you want me to run your slides, or do you want to share your screen?
I'm going to share my screen. That's okay.
Okay, sure.
Good afternoon. My name is Savannah Lacy. Most of you are familiar with who I am and what I do, but I'm the lead water manager for Lake Okeechobee, as well as the water management lead on the LOSOM project. Pretty much anything to do with the lake, got my hands in some way or another. I'm here to talk today just about current operations. Basically, this cartoon, we call it our cartoon slide, but we think it's really important to always start out with talking about where we've been over the last several years, because as you know, decisions on the lake are sort of carried through multiple years, and where we are today and the conditions on the ground today are really defined by the past several years of events. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through really quick, just remind everybody where we've been, and then we'll talk about where we're going. Excuse me. If I can get my laser pointer here. Okay, so back in 2018, many of us remember we were reeling after a really tough summer. Following Hurricane Irma in 2017, we had higher water levels throughout the summer of 2018, battling high releases, algal blooms, and some of the worst lake ecology we've seen in a while, with pretty much decimation of the submerged aquatic vegetation within the lake. During the summer and the fall of 2018, we made the decision to sort of intentionally lower lake levels to sort of combat all of those challenges we were facing at the time. And over the course of the fall of 2018, as well as the spring of 2019, we lowered the lake all the way down to about 10.8 on June 1st in 2019. So during this period of time here. In 2019, we had a pretty interesting year. We started out the wet season fairly normally, but then in September, we had a big scare with Hurricane Dorian. I know a lot of us remember being extremely nervous. Most of you probably evacuated your homes for that. A very scary hurricane that hits the Bahamas. It was supposed to sit over Lake Okeechobee and do what it did over the Bahamas, but over the city of Okeechobee as its circulation center there. So made us all nervous, but ended up skirting around us and just coming to the side of the Florida Peninsula. And what that did was it sucked all the moisture away from Florida and sort of entered the dry season a tad bit early for us. We had a very, very dry September, which is the total opposite of what would have happened if Hurricane Dorian would have come over the lake, which would have been a very wet September. So anyways, Dorian was there, Humberto kind of threatened as well, and we ended up only hitting about 14 feet for our peak lake level in 2019. And so we had the SAV doing a lot better. We had, like I said, this maximum of 14 feet, and that sort of led us into, okay, we only hit 14 feet this year. We're sort of in a conservation mode now, where we're not going to be making a lot of extra releases. And so during the fall of 2020, up until June, we were really in this conservation mode. And even when we started to get wet season inflows, we continued to hold water in the lake and sort of conserve water. Started out last year at about 11 feet in June. Coming up, we had a pretty wet October, and then lake levels continued to rise here. And we continued to hold. LOR's 2008 regulation schedule was calling for releases, and we continued to hold back, sort of hoping to absorb all of the wet season that we could, and hoping we could continue that through the end of the wet season, which is typically in October. But as we approached 15.5 feet on the lake, we started to do inspections of HHD as per our dam safety protocols. And we were really faced with sort of the challenge of a very hyperactive tropical season last year. We all remember we were very well into the Greek alphabet there. And then in November, we had Tropical Storm Eta, which wasn't so much a wind event, but definitely a rain event, which caused the lake to go all the way up to about 16.5. So we continued our dam safety inspections. We began Lake Okeechobee releases around mid-October last year, and then shifted to sort of dry season operations in December and January. And since then, we've been sort of in this dry season mode. We've been releasing low amounts of water. And in February of this year, we began releases under our harmful algal bloom deviation, which was approved last fall. Essentially what that does is it allows us to make some extra releases in the springtime and in the early summer while the risk of algal blooms on the lake and in the estuaries is low, so that we can have a little bit more flexibility during the summertime to be able to hold back. And what it does is it kind of creates this water bank where we released extra so we can have a little bit more flexibility later to hold back. And I've added just this little nest here because we have a good news story that we have over 30 snail kite nests active on the lake right now. Many of them are incubating eggs. I think one of them has hatched so far from the data that I have. So we're very excited about that. Excuse me. The first nest we've had on Lake Okeechobee for snail kites since 2018. So it's pretty important that we get it right this year. And we're very excited about what that has in store for us this spring. So with that, I know that was a lot, but I think it's always important to remember sort of where we've been. And we'll go on to the next slide. So in February, released that HAB deviation, as I mentioned, and we started to do that about 2,000 CFS at a 79. Did that for most of February. We didn't really see a lot of change on the lake during the month of February, which is not uncommon. It's colder and there's not as much evapotranspiration and that sort of thing on the lake. So we ramped things up in March just a little bit to sort of help things along and build up some of that more of that water bank. March, we ramped up releases to the east at 500 CFS at S80. And so we're continuing to do that as of today. Looking forward into the April-May timeframe, our HAB deviation has us considering a lot of different things as we address, as we consider what releases to make under the deviation. So we're looking at where we're projected to be for June 1st, that sort of thing. We're looking at lake ecology to include snail kite nesting, SAV, that sort of thing, wading bird, foraging activity and nesting on the lake and in the Everglades, of course. Looking at lake levels in terms of where we might be in the summertime and the risk of releases next year, the risk of algal blooms during the summer, which is sort of always an ever-present risk. And then what are the dry season needs of the water supply folks near the lake and the Everglades, as well as the Caloosahatchee. So looking at a lot of things as we move forward and making sure that we're continuing to get updates on all of those things as we make those decisions. Under the HAB deviation, we really made a commitment to work with stakeholders and partner agencies to make sure that we were getting the best information and that we were getting feedback at every step of the way. With this deviation, we really wanted to try and mitigate any future harm, and we want to make sure that we're not, making anything worse as we try to do that. So we're really being extra sensitive with these considerations this year. All right, so as we move into April and May, we're going to see evapotranspiration pick up. We're going to see water supply needs pick up as April and May are typically the driest, hottest months of the dry season, and we typically see the wet season rains start sometime May and June. But basically, we're anticipating that those things will ramp up, and we're already seeing that. We're seeing La Nina conditions sort of prevail with below normal rainfall this month and forecasted for next month to be below normal. And so we're already looking at assessing cutting back flows out of the lake, and we'll get into that on the next slide. But looking forward into the wet season, we're going to have more flexibility than we did back in 2018. Even though our water levels are fairly similar to back then, with this deviation, we've built up some flexibility with our water bank. We're gonna continue to do that as we move forward while taking into account all of the conditions that I mentioned on the last slide. And all of that being said, there's still a pretty high probability based on lake levels that we will have to make lake releases sometime in the summer or fall. But what we're going to try to do is really take into account the timing of those releases. And we're going to try and hold whenever we can when there's a risk of algal bloom exposure, that sort of thing. So we're hoping that we will have a lot more leeway to do that this year with the work that we've been doing on the deviation. All right, so what we're currently doing, as I said, we're releasing 2,000 CFS at S79 and 500 CFS at S80. But the commander will announce later today that we're going to be making a reduction this week down to 1,500 CFS at S79 and maintaining that 500 CFS to the east. Of course, water is still going south to the conservation areas. That will continue. And basically, this reduction is the direct response to what we're seeing on the recession rates for the lake. So as I mentioned, we're being extra sensitive on all of these sort of conditions. And basically, our recession rate's a little high, especially for snail kite nesting. It's one of the things we specifically accounted for in our deviation. So we're going to start making cutbacks and see if we can get that recession rate into that sweet spot for the snail kites again. And that may require an additional cutback next week. We'll reevaluate things next week and see how we go. But our first step is going to be going down to 1,500 CFS at S79. And that's all I have. I'll hand it back over to Mark, and I think we have time for questions for Tim and I.
Yeah, thanks. I know it was kind of a little long presentation, but we certainly appreciate getting that full kind of gamut. We did have a couple of questions that are in the chat already, and I'll put them in the queue. But one of them came up with John Mayo, but before that, I talked about the schedule, Tim, about the, January 2022 is when we're going to get that draft. NEPA draft, and so people know that that goes forward to October 22, which is the final record of decision date. And I guess right after that is when the implementation of the new Lake Okeechobee schedule goes into effect. So that coincides with the repair of the Herbert Hoover Dike, and that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. And the completion of construction of Herbert Hoover Dike has to be complete before we would be able to implement the LOSOM schedule. Right now everything's looking like it'll marry up at the end of 2022.
Great. And I recall John wanted to ask a question, and he may want to do it himself, but he talked about the future without conditions model run. Look for Kissimmee River that shows a kind of an increase in that headwater water budget, going from about 540,000 acre feet to 550,000 acre feet in the wet season. Is there a reason that it increased in that model run in the model without conditions, future without conditions for the Kissimmee run?
That's a good question. I had not seen that. So I would guess that has to do with the implementation of the headwater schedule and being able to store additional water within Lakes Kissimmee, Hashmaha, and Cypress that would otherwise have been maybe gone into the groundwater or been released through evapotranspiration. So I would guess it has something to do with that, but I don't know the details within the model runs for sure.
Answer that on the side. Blair Wickstrom, you had a question. You're in the queue, and then anybody else put in the chat, I'll put you in the queue to question. Go ahead, Blair.
All right, thank you. Tim, considering that flows going into the lake historically have been a lot more, 6 times, as you say, going south, and looking at your slide 6, where you've got 8 regions marked, and you've got 27 issues or critical issues or views, as you said, there's not one of those critical issues that shows a benefit to having a higher lake. Everything that we've talked about so far in the discussion, a high lake is detrimental to the whole system. And so again, my question is, with that being the case, and a history of meeting all consumptive use permits with a low lake, why aren't we focused more on getting water south instead of storing water north? Why aren't we looking at a lower lake? Again, if you look at slide 6, you look at all of those various stakeholders and you look at all of those issues, all of them benefit by a lower lake. So my question is, how come we're not focused a lot more on keeping that lake lower?
Sure, I can give an answer to that. And I think it gets back to when you look at the SERP program as a whole. SERP envisions storage all around the lake, so north, south, east, and west. And that's required really to meet the needs for storage throughout the system. There's different benefits to storage south of the lake and north of the lake. Storage north of the lake allows you to keep water during wet times and make it available for use during dry times, which benefits not only the lake health, but also allows you to provide water to the environment that is needed in the Caloosahatchee, of course, in conjunction with the C-43 reservoir. It also provides the ability to enhance the water that you can provide to the south during dry times. Once that water gets into the lake, it has to go somewhere. So without that storage north of the lake, you are forced into a management decision to either let it go out to the east or west, or try to force it to the south if there's capacity. So that storage north of the lake really increases your flexibility in how you keep water within the system, as well as being able to provide the water supply to the environment in the lake, as well as the estuary, the Caloosahatchee estuary, and the greater Everglades during dry times. So it really increases your ability to manage the system better by having the storage north of the lake. That said, the storage south of the lake is extremely important as well, to be able to move more water to the south when we have it in the system, and be able to hold it for use by the Everglades during dry times. So I think you really need all of the storage to work together within the system to get back to something that's much more natural and provide the ability to manage, to provide benefit for everyone. Hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Well, maybe just a follow-up, not so much on storage, but just the philosophy of keeping the lake as high as we do. I mean, in terms of the LOSOM, I know that all of the models, were being considered. And so I know we're considering a lower lake, but just philosophically, when you look at slide 6 and you look at all of the detriments and all of the issues of the stakeholders, none of it benefits them by having a higher lake. And so it's not storage, it's because that's what the reservoir or the lake is, it's storage. So why are we storing so much water in the lake if it results in all of these problems that we have to now mitigate and work around?
Sure, and it all gets back to SERP and the features that are in the SERP project, because there's so much water in the system, it has to be stored somewhere. And right now, one of the only places to store it is within the lake. Otherwise, it has to be sent somewhere in the system, which now is some to the south, but a lot of it to the east and the west. So without storage that's envisioned by SERP, we're very limited on what you can do with the water that we have in the system, which limits the ability to lower the lake. So you're right. I think everybody understands from an environmental perspective, the lake is better when you're able to manage it lower. You get much better quality of SAV. You get better water quality. You get just much more vibrant wildlife within the lake. But you need the storage in the system to be able to manage the lake lower and still provide all of the benefits that everybody needs. Yeah, no, and I think ultimately that's where we all want to get to, but we also need all the infrastructure that SERP provides to be able to get to a better management of the entire system. So we're at an interim step right now, trying to make better decisions with what we have in place, but we need all of that infrastructure to really get to where everybody wants to be. So it's important not to lose sight of that. We're not to the end. A lot of really smart people put together the SERP program back in the 90s, and I think everything that they thought at that time and really what they planned is what we still need in the system to be able to get to a better management.
All right, we'll kind of move on. I've got Jackie Thurl-Lippisch and also Ronaldo Diaz follow. So Jackie, you have a question?
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Savannah. Really appreciate the very informative presentation. I noticed early on in your slides, Tim, and I'm on my cell phone today, so I can't see everything real close. But you mentioned that there were considerations for the Corps, and one of they were WRDA considerations, I believe, and one of those considerations was no discharges to the St. Lucie River. And I believe that that is the handiwork of Brian Mast, our congressman, who has been so pushing to try to help this area. That's amazing. I mean, we may never have someone in that position again who can put something like this to the Army Corps to consider. Can you please tell me how much consideration you actually give it, what you're required under the Central and South Florida Plan and WRDA to give it? I find that pretty remarkable that's in there, and I'm very grateful for it, and I hope it occurs. So I'm sorry, I'm going on and on. Please tell me the facts on that.
Sure, yeah, and if Kim, you have any, or Savannah, you have anything to add, please do. But yeah, it's part of the process. I mean, it's giving as much consideration as everything else within the process. So we'll analyze that with the PDT and with the stakeholders now that we have those model runs done, and really see what the viability of a plan like that looks like. How is that not only providing the positive effects to the St. Lucie, but what are the effects to other parts of the system? So it's given consideration just like all of the other alternatives. It's right in the mix.
Okay, and is that why we have those considerations? I'm sorry, the ones with like C1E or whatever they are, those are those considerations coming out of that WRDA request? That's correct. Yeah, those were developed explicitly to address the requirements of WRDA and put them into the process. And right now is the best place to do that, to give them the full consideration that I think those ideas deserve.
Yeah, so hey, this is Kim. Hi, Jackie and others.
Hi, Kim.
Yeah, we have a specific model simulation that eliminates all the discharges to the St. Lucie. So the WRDA direction to the Corps to consider that has a very explicit model run to compare with everything else with that elimination. And in addition, some of the other plans and alternatives we looked at also reduced and looked at reducing the discharges of the St. Lucie. So there's going to be multiple alternatives to do that we're evaluating that look at that. So it's not just the WRDA plan that does it. There's other alternatives that look at that.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Thank you,
Jackie,
Kim,
for bringing that up. Yeah, we, the Rivers Coalition last month put forward a letter to Lisa Alley about our comments about LOSOM, and specifically addressed that we are supporting that 4C1 3307 22448, which is the schedule that Jackie's mentioning, I believe, and everybody's talking about. And that's the objective for the St. Lucie ecology, St. Lucie estuary ecology. So obviously that favors what we would like to see here, and it calls for 0 releases to the St. Lucie estuary. Of course, balancing out to everything else is a big challenge, but that is our strong kind of recommendation to prefer, obviously, for this coast, being that Lake Okeechobee releases to the St. Lucie are the largest freshwater inflows, along with other pollution aspects to the St. Lucie. So moving on here, I saw Ronaldo Diaz had a question, and Savannah Lacy might have answered it in the chat function. And also I see Eve Samples. Did you have a question, Eve?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I put it in the chat. I'm just wondering if Tim or Savannah can tell us how much off the lake in terms of feet or inches those 80 ASR wells will amount to when they're all complete, which we know is a long way off. And just as an aside, we do have concerns about potential contaminants underground related to the ASR wells, but putting that aside, even if all 80 are built, how much level on the lake is that going to save us?
Sure, it's a great question. And I think pumping at full capacity, you could get up to 440,000 acre feet per year stored within the aquifer with the ASR wells, which equates to, I guess, a little bit less than a foot of water on the lake. And really, though, I think that the importance of the ASR wells is that storage during dry time. So when you do get to lower lake levels, it provides a lot of management flexibility to be able to kind of lower the risk of going too low. Is really the big benefit from ASR wells.
And a quick follow up, if you don't mind, is it realistic to anticipate all 80 of them operating at the same time at full capacity?
It all depends on the water available in the system, and most of the ones that are sited in LOPE have access directly to canals that lead into Lake Okeechobee. So if it's really wet, then you could expect them all to be running at the same time. And
yeah, it's really hard to.
The capacity of the ASR wells is only about 5 million gallons per day. So they don't pump a lot of water at a time. So they don't need like really high lake levels to function. You can run those when you have just normal lake levels and still be providing that benefit.
Yeah, that's a lot less capacity trying to pump that water 20, and that 400,000+ acre feet, or about 1 foot off the lake, is basically, if you're pumping all 80 wells 24/7, 365 days a year, which I think your question, Eve, was that's not really going to be the practical operation of those. But, you know, they anticipate using them in conjunction with FEBs and other things. You know, it's unlike a reservoir like the C44 reservoir has a pump that's about 1,000 CFS. So that's a huge capacity compared to an ASR well at about 7.7 per ASR well CFS. So let's kind of move on. I know we've got a lot of concerns we want to get kind of moving on. If there's not any really further questions, I see Becky Harris, you said you wanted to fill in a few details, but did you want to bring up we can bring that harmful algal bloom system up later. We want to get into our state reports, our government reports. Okay. Well, thanks again, Tim and Savannah, Kim Taplin and Erica. Thank you for your presentation and being with us today. Tim wants to mention that we do want to, if you have questions as follow-up, get them into them through their website. I know Savannah, Lacy, Tim Gysan, and others are available through an email. So let's get their emails. We'll put those out there on the agenda so that people in our organization can get to them. I want to say too, we have over 62 participants recognizing the city of Stewart's Mayor Eula Clark, Becky Bruner, and also Merritt Matheson, I believe, all commissioners from the city of Stewart. And of course, Jackie Thurl-Lippisch, we appreciate you being on here too. So thanks again for your presentation and participation in our meeting today. All right, we're going to move on our agenda, government and agency progress reports. We'll start with Martin County, go to City of Stewart, and then South Florida Water Management. So Martin County, John, I see you and Diane are on. Any quick updates? Great.
This is Diane. Can you hear me? Or John,
Yep.
Do you want to go?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So you already said some things about the estuary and water quality conditions. I did check the salinities this morning at the North and South Fork. They're between 15 and 16, so they're not really bad. The middle estuary unit is broken by a boat, so I don't have any numbers for that. What we really want to talk to you about and let the whole Rivers Coalition know is that there is a C44 operations manual informational meeting that is occurring on April 8th from 5:30 to 6:30. I believe it's a WebEx meeting. We all need to be involved. We all need to make sure that that operation manual of the reservoir and STA remains for local basin runoff and not allow for more Lake Okeechobee discharges. So I can send that WebEx information to Barbara so that she can send it to all coalition members. And we will go ahead and do that, but we wanted everyone to know. We kind of missed out, I think, on an opportunity with the Kissimmee River Restoration Operation Manual in some way, shape, or form that just recently got codified. So unfortunately.
Interesting.
All right. That's appreciated. And John, do you have anything else? We'll move on to City of Stewart then. City. Is Ben Hogarth you're on, or Merritt Matheson?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you good. Thanks.
Okay, my comment very brief this week. Appreciate everybody, appreciate the Corps being on the phone and on the line. The city is just prepared to put forward probably the most substantial comments that we're going to have for the LOSOM process in writing, and we appreciate Mark overlooking that and kind of giving us some revisions. So we're going to be sending that out to the Corps before the weekend, maybe this afternoon. And the LOSOM process, the most important critical component of it is the next 2 to 3 months. So stay engaged and definitely pay attention. We certainly are. And if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'll be happy to talk more offline.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ben, and thanks for participating on the PDT meetings as a part of the PDT project delivery team. We appreciate that. Jackie, we're up for South Florida Water Management District updates. Or you have some updates.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, I don't see myself, but I'll keep going. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Sorry on this phone. For South Florida Water Management District, there had been a plan for the Colonel to come to the St. Lucie River and for Drew Bartlett to come to the St. Lucie River. There were many different stakeholders who were informed of that event. And unfortunately, there was a small craft advisory, and so it was canceled. To make up for that, at the last minute, Drew Bartlett is executive director of the South Florida Water Management District, invited me like the day before. Did I want to go with him? And two scientists from the South Florida Water Management District, Dr. Jessica Frost and Dr. Melanie Parker. Although I was very disappointed that more stakeholders couldn't be there, it was a really, really good visit in the boat. We went and saw the oyster bar that is the largest one off of Rio, and the scientists got in wetsuits. I couldn't believe it, and they dove down in there and they brought up oysters. And the whole thing was very informative for me. And I could tell that it made a big impact on Drew Bartlett because the whole thing was about salinity. And obviously, if you have too many discharges, that's trashed. And so I felt like that was a real plus and a real education. And I could see that Drew was thinking and ticking, and he's thinking these releases cannot go over 500, you know. And then we went over to Boy Scout Island, and there's, you know, teeny little like rhizomes of seagrass and little teeny things, but there's not much seagrass there. And that was not as happy of an experience. And I think was very good for the scientists, and they talked about everything. But I, as someone who grew up here and used to see the pictures that Mark's brother Chris would take, I said, you know, we cannot accept this. You know, we cannot accept this. I mean, there used to be, you know, acres of lush seagrass, and something is really wrong. And so again, Jessica Frost, the scientist, she said, I said, can you describe this in one word? You know, what is good or bad for this system? And she gave me a one-word answer, which you don't usually get out of scientists. And she said, light, light. What have we not had with all of the discharges? Light, when those things are covered up in dark waters. So it was a very good hands-on event with Drew Bartlett in particularly. And hopefully we'll schedule something else in the future. And I think they're going to do everything they can, to keep those releases not higher than 500 for as long as that can be done. And I also, just because I do love wildlife, I think it's really cool that at our last South Florida Water Management District meeting, there are 35 snail kite nests in the C44. Okay, that thing they just got the STs online. So that's great for wildlife in Martin County. And the other excellent thing that the board did was we supported a curtain wall to be put around the 8.5 square mile area. And everything that we're fighting for up here is for is water. If there's no place to let the water out, it won't work. So when we're fighting for allowing more water to go south to Florida Bay, we're fighting for ourselves. And I felt very positive about that. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate that. And yeah, the district, we had some conflicts. We couldn't make it out on that day, but our seagrasses are important, and appreciate Todd Thurlow helping them with mapping out those additions and things going forward. Do we have any other state and federal agencies like FDP or FWC on board today? If not, we'll hear from Paul Gray. Paul, thanks for joining us from Lake Okeechobee update, and Audubon, thanks.
Hi, folks. Yeah, actually, you've already heard all about it. The lake's deeper than what we were comfortable with. We hope to get it down before the wet season because there's a chance of harmful algal blooms this year. It's not 100% guarantee, but with all the big inflows last year from that wet season, we may be set up for it. So luckily, the dry season is starting to kick in, and it's lowering the lake. As Savannah said, you don't want the lake to go down too fast because it destroys bird nesting, but we also need to get it down. So it's just always difficult to manage this lake. And I want to point out, if you looked at that slide that Savannah had with Dorian offshore, and the lake was about 14 feet, the big fear was if that came in, we'd be at 17 feet and really bad things would follow. And what happened instead of getting the deep water, the storm didn't come in and everything dried out. And we went clear down to 11 feet, and there was a lot of concern about water supply. So on that day in September, when Dorian was threatening us, the Corps was in danger. All of us were in danger of two diametrically opposed things. One was too much water and the other was too little water, all at the same time. So that's kind of the challenge that we have managing this system. And it gets back to, we got to build SERP, and the district's doing a lot of stuff to get that going. So we got to keep working. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Any other state and federal legislation going on? There are a couple of pieces of legislation going forward, and hopefully people are keeping an eye on, but nothing that's really addressing the water quality issues at this point. So but we are keeping an eye on that. There's a lot to do with some oil drilling issues and other issues. So we're trying to keep after that. Rivers Coalition reports. We'll go to, I saw Nick Mader, you're on, about River Kids, and Todd Weissing, Speakers Bureau.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yep. Good.
Okay, I don't have much to report except we're working on the corrections for the workbook to print out, and we want to print out about 5,000. I've talked to Valerie Gaynor, who is now the new director of the Environmental Studies Center. She's going to incorporate our workbook also with Environmental Studies Center children when they come back, which is great news. So I wanted to also address an issue. I know discharges in Lake O are the biggest thing with our river, but we also have some problems with Bird Island and Boy Scout Island, as Jackie was saying she visited. The birds of Bird Island are also going over to Boy Scout Island, and there are so many recreational fishermen over there that discard their lines and that are fishing in the critical wildlife area. I spend a lot of time over there, and I've talked to many of the boats. I've actually taken pictures of them, and we have to do something about regulating our our precious islands of critical wildlife habitat more. And everybody needs to be aware that recreational fishing gear is a huge problem in our rivers for all the animals, not only dolphins and turtles, but birds. I can't tell you how many times people have called me with birds entangled, and I'm sure Mark has heard that before many times. But we have to spread the word somehow. And I think it would be really great to somehow do some kind of a campaign, whether it's River Kids or part of the Rivers Coalition or Indian River Keeper, to get to these tackle stores in West Marine and marinas around the area to really just bring that to light, because it's a huge, huge problem. Our river is littered in recreational fishing gear and lures and hooks and everything. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Nick. Todd, you have anything on Speakers Bureau?
Sure, I sure do. Hopefully you can see me.
Sure.
I'm appreciative that Savannah and Tim were here today. Enjoyed their message, appreciate it, but I like to show this. And it's the slide where 60% of the years since 2004, we have received releases from Lake Okeechobee. Every single time releases have come our way, health department has had to issue warnings to stay away from our water. That's not 10% of the time. It's not 15% of the time. It's not just a couple of times. It's 60% of the time. System's broken and it has to be fixed. And we have to be, they've got to take care of us. Not everybody else, just take care of us. Okay, that's enough about that. I'm in charge of the Speakers Bureau. I'm the coordinator. Speakers Bureau is picking back up. We have an event scheduled outdoors next month. We're also receiving some requests from organizations later in the year. My suggestion is, if you have an organization, you'd like to hear our message, this is our outreach program, reach out to us. You can reach out to us by clicking on the Request a Speaker button on the website. So we've got LOSOM coming up. We're going to need our residents to speak out. One of the ways to do that is to request a speaker. We'll try to get you informed, engaged, and let's make a difference. Okay, that's my report.
Oh, great. Well, I'd like to kind of bring that up. I know we're kind of looking at the local issues and what's going on. I bring up the water quality here. If you can see our water quality map, this was the week of last week on 3/17. As I mentioned earlier, they started the lake releases back on March 6th. So March 6th, we started the releases of about 500 CFS, and it looks like it's going to continue. You can see the kind of the change in conditions in the South Fork, particularly as that enters into the South Fork. But the salinities also in the middle and outer estuaries are not as healthy really for the habitats, particularly oyster reefs in the middle. If they go below that 10 to 10 parts per thousand in the middle estuary, we start to really get a decrease in stress and harm to oyster reefs. But the poor conditions, are pretty much about visibility as well. I mean, Jackie mentioned that stirring up of that silt and sediment, which actually goes all the way out to the outer estuary around where the seagrass beds are. And that dropping of that light level has really diminished, for the long duration, has diminished our seagrass acreage out there. So we're all about, cutting back on the releases. And even if the water quality kind of is looking good, remember that the habitat has been impacted dramatically over the years, and we need to get back to kind of what we're doing. So the local conditions, you can see the salinities at Roosevelt Bridge and the outer estuary, as they kind of diminished over that week. And we always try to look at that, but water quality is always up on our maps, and you can go to our website to look that up. I do want to bring up, I know we have some other conditions from Lake Worth Waterkeeper, but let's get Indian River Waterkeeper. You had something to mention too. you want to bring up? Or Todd, do you have anything to update on seagrass activity, you or Jim?
I could just show a couple of things if you want. I'll try to be quick.
All right.
I'm going to try to share my screen. I think Daryl needs to close his so I can open. All right.
Or I stopped sharing, so you go ahead. All right.
So I guess you can kind of see that. I mean, we kind of already have the stuff. The lake's at 14.67, and as has been reported, they're averaging 500 CFS out of the C44 since the last releases started. So this graph basically represents those recent releases, and from what it's showing here, that's about 19,000 acre feet since they started. And so over the last 19 days, that equates to about 511 CFS. And so they're hitting it right on target, being right at about 500 CFS is what they're aiming at. And that equates to about 1/2 of 1 inch off of the lake from a volume standpoint. And so on the seagrass update, this was the slide that I showed last meeting from 2007, where you can kind of see the seagrass is out on Sailfish Flats. And then this is it at the last meeting, where you can kind of see that most of the seagrasses are gone. I was out there. This is actually on the 16th. This is a more recent slide. So of course it looks pretty much the same.
That's March. I'm sorry, that's March 16th.
This is March 16th. Yeah, it's at a different scale. I don't have it on my website yet, but it's the most recent one that doesn't have any clouds. So it's, pretty much looking the same. It's not like it's going to jump back overnight. I guess the one that I showed at the last meeting was February. This is February 24th. And so, but I did get out there with the kids a couple, like the last weekend or the weekend before. And so there is some actual little sprouts of the grass out there. And here's another picture. Thought I had a picture of the map so I could kind of show you where I was. But yeah, I was right out there in the middle of the Sailfish Flats. And so I guess that's about all right there.
That's encouraging. Yeah.
I'd like to add something.
Certainly.
Yeah, Jim.
The manatee loss isn't just in Brevard County. We're losing manatees to starvation down here as well as boat strikes and all the other reasons they die. I think that, we need to keep focusing on suspended solids and the turbidity issue because the sunlight is the critical feature, and whether they're being choked by macroalgae or turbidity, suspended solids coming from the lake, it's all detrimental to the health of the lagoon. And I'm looking at really serious diversity loss. It's not just seagrasses. It's not just the macrofauna. It's the stuff on your pilings is disappearing. It's really serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thanks.
So with sunlight being that one word answer that Jackie got, this was that 2017 slide that kind of shows how no sunlight's getting through to the grass, because it's like laying a tarp on top of the river when it's that turbid. And then the other thing that I was going to mention too is just on the discharges. This orange line represents S308, where the green bars are the water coming through to the lake. So of course, more water is coming in through S308 than is going out S80. So that means that about 5,300 acre feet has gone into the C44 basin that's not being released to the St. Lucie River. So that water is going somewhere into the new C44 reservoir or for irrigation. And so that brings it up to about 653 CFS, which is above 500, but the 500 is measured at S80.
Yeah, thanks, Todd, for bringing that up. They do let water out of the lake through S308 into the canal, but it is uptake by about 25 pump stations along the C44 canal between the locks at St. Lucie Lock and Dam and Port Mayaca. There's about 25 pump stations. They take out water for irrigation of the C44 basin. As was mentioned, the C44 reservoir and STAs are due for completion this coming year. So we're looking to try to see if that can, store and treat that water before it comes back into the system. Mike Connor, we got you for any river keeper, and then we'll move to Lake Worth. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark.
Mike.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks to Tim Gysan for presenting that. I was on the PDT meeting the other day, and I must admit, it's so complicated. These kind of things make your eyes glaze over after a while. It's tough, but there's a lot of models, 27,000 models. And we, every Riverkeeper, are in favor of any model that stops the discharges. I'll keep it short and sweet. That's what we want. No more discharges. And also, I kind of questioned the utility of these pulse releases at this time. I was juggling the two thoughts about what's better for our estuary, having 1.5 inches off the lake on the tail end of this situation, or could we have used all this time between now and June 1 for the estuary to get a little more recovery? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I just think the former would have been a better situation for our seagrass, and especially for our fish and organisms that spawn at this time of year. So the salinities aren't drastic on the downside, on the outside of the estuary, as everybody spoke about, but they are getting pretty bad again in the South Fork. I measured 1 part salt yesterday at Layton Park, 1 part at Layton Park Ramp. It was about 5. Anyway, a couple quick things. Brian Mast bills are very encouraged by the filing of the bills. I think the number 2 bill is the one I think is going to be a tough one if it would ever go through, because he wants the Corps to quit stop the discharge immediately should we find microcystin counts of 8 parts or more on the lake. And I don't know in the real world whether that could happen. Sadly, it won't happen right now. I do like the other bills. I think it's a no-brainer that the Corps will give us good previous warning when they are going to let the water go and when there is microcystin levels like that in the lake. But I do wish the bills well, and I hope that they get traction. About the Northern Estuary, the Manatee UME, unusual mortality event, was filed and it was accepted. So now there's more hands on deck up there with fisheries scientists to try to determine what to do about the manatees at this point. I think it's already a determined fact that they are dying from starvation. And a little of the cold stress might have hurt them as well, because their resilience wasn't what it should be, because they were hungry and they had no food stuff, and there's no grass in the Banana River that we know of. So at this point, I even have people in the Northern Estuary ask Riverkeeper, what are you doing about the manatees? That's something you can't answer right now. I mean, there's plans to move some animals, get them out of harm's way, get them to a place on their migration where they can find some food. But there's folks that want to start feeding manatees up there too. And, it's heartbreaking because you want to feed the manatees, but do you feed the manatees? That's going to be a big question. FWC, it's against the law. It's fruitless to do it. It's not going to stop them from dying at this point. But some good-hearted people up in the northern part of my jurisdiction are up in arms about it, that they can't feed manatees. That's a tough situation.
You're going to have to.
I'm sorry, Jim.
You're going to have to exclude them too if you're going to get restoration going. This is a really, really big problem. And, right now their gut flora is so unhealthy that they don't thrive even when they're being fed.
Yes.
It's really chronic.
As troubling as the fact they found, I think in 107 manatees tested, their plasma, 80%, 74 or 58% of the animals had glyphosate in their plasma. They're storing glyphosate in their bodies. Maybe we all are. If we're eating fish, think about this. How much glyphosate is in the system right now? I brought Grant Gilmore, Dr. Grant Gilmore, on board this week as a advisory board member, and we're real excited about that. Every time Grant and I talk over the last 2 years, our conversation seems to go to glyphosate. Grant thinks there may be a smoking gun here, which we need to uncover because of the amount of glyphosate in the system. And just this week as well, I requested a public records request from St. Lucie County. I want all records about glyphosate use, tonnage, poundage, whatever the amount is. I want to know where it's being sprayed, what their plan is going forward, and ultimately we want to find out why they're using this herbicide at this point. We've seen the damage around the county. I've seen the damage on the shores of the IRL. So I put in a records request about a week ago, so I'll be calling them probably today and see where that's at. I don't know if anybody's done that in the past. Martin County is next in my mind. Other than that, we have a possible press conference on April 1st at the Gysan Causeway. As some of you may or may not know, we did sort of lead the charge with some good local anglers on trying to get that Gysan Beach Upper Causeway fishing closure reversed. And I'm waiting on a call today or tomorrow from Martin County and DOT to find out whether, and Blair's on top of this with us, thankfully. Thanks, Blair. We're going to find out whether, I think we're going to get the bridge open. And to Nick Mater's question about, or comments about pollution, it is embarrassing, Nick, it is. But this is a situation where the state of Florida wanted to shut out anglers because of a few litter bugs among them. And we feel by getting the bridge back and doing some schooling and some advocacy there, we can change the culture. So this is a great example of what we can do to change the mindset of fishermen on the lagoon. And we're going to play it up pretty hard because I think it needs media attention, and we may start a culture change on this to let our anglers know that your pollution is hurting our efforts to restore this place. We also joined the Gysan Beach Chamber of Commerce this week, and we will be taking part on most of the gym in Gysan Thursday nights. We're going to have an educational membership table down there. I'm doing some raffles down there for fundraising. I hope you guys go to Jam Gysan, look for the Indian River Keeper tent. We'll be there from this point forward. Lastly, fundraising. We're going to be fundraising a kayak through Native Water Sports. Ted Nylander has arranged for a crescent fishing kayaks at the top. We're probably going to sell about 100 raffle tickets at $20 a piece, and hopefully get some traction on that. So that's what we're doing during COVID, is trying to do fundraising as well. And we appreciate all the support thus far this year. We're pretty happy with the year we've had. Lastly, Pete Hink, one of my board members, was given an award by Audubon for his really great YouTube videos on seagrass up in the Savannah region. And he's also going after the glyphosate spraying in all waterways, freshwater in that part of the county. Audubon awarded them the award last week, and Pete is going to be doing we're trying to partner possibly. We're going to run this by the board, but we want to get involved with Sea and Shoreline, which did a Fort Pierce planting up there, and they're looking at Sebastian Inlet State Park right now, and we've got some interest up there to do a similar seagrass planting with cages, to track the grass growth and determine what killed the grass in the first place. But it's a lot involved there. It takes a lot of grant money, but we probably will partner with them in some way, volunteer time, to help those projects go. And that's about all I have right now.
Thanks, Jim. We also at Florida Oceanographic have a seagrass nursery, and we're propagating seagrass to get out and plant out we have the permanent sites that we're doing out there. Mentioned to appreciate Indian River Keeper report, and got Lake River Keeper, possibly Ronaldo, for quick comments, and then we'll go to member comments and wrap up. So Ronaldo, are you still on? I know.
Yeah, I'm on. I'm actually out in the field, so hopefully you guys can hear me. I don't have too much to update on other than thank you, City of Stuart, for signing on to our effort against Bahamian oil drilling. It really means a lot. And I think it will send a big message to the Bahamian Prime Minister. And also I wanted to point out that, it's March 25th, right? And still really early, but conditions are kind of already ripe. Lake Worth Lagoon, we've already taken some Lake O water. We continue to do so, to be totally honest. And it's not a significant quantity right now, but we've already had a cyanobacteria bloom. I was just at the S155 spillway that connects us right onto Lake Worth Lagoon, and there's warning signs already up there. So I guess the message is, to everyone on a call is keep an eye out, and you never know, in your own backyards, you might wake up one morning and have a bloom. So keep an eye out and let people like me and Mike know.
It's a good point. So if anybody has eyes on the lagoons, the estuaries, you see any kind of algae blooms, please let us know right away so we can get that communication out. And as Mike Connor was mentioned about the North Estuary and manatees, I think next month on April 22nd, which is actually Earth Day, at our next Rivers Coalition meeting, we're going to focus on manatees and seagrass and that kind of impacts in there going forward, as well as future programs. Jim Moyer and his team got together that we're going to be looking at the health issues, the economic impacts going forward to these next couple of meetings. So we have member comments, and I know that I believe Becky Harris had a comment to bring up. Becky, did you want to bring that up? I know we had University of Miami issue study.
Can you hear me?
Right? Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mark. So the University of Miami is going to study harmful algal blooms and how they affect human health. Thank you. There's the flyer. They're including all of Florida where HABs exist. And at least my experience when I've talked to legislators, the Corps, the district, the Department of Health, Department of Environmental Protection, they keep telling me we need more data on how HABs affect human health. So this is our opportunity. We certainly, unfortunately, have HABs here in this area. The study seems very simple. I've talked to the people. The investigators will either come here. I've suggested the volunteers in medicine because that's where the other people use, FAU used. Anyway, they'll come here or mail supplies to participants. It requires some biological samples, which are nasal swabs, maybe some saliva, also collection of water samples. The groups they want to study are residents, visitors, and people who work near the water. And they are compensating people with gift cards. Right now, it's a 3-month study. They hope to get grant extension, and it might go for a year. I believe they want to get these volunteers gathered quickly, like in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But the flyer has the contacts for the researchers, and I encourage all of us to participate in this.
Great. Thank you, Becky, for bringing that up. I did have another question. Jackie, you had a member comment. Jackie Thurlow-Lippish.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. This is me making a comment as Jackie Thurlow-Lippish, member Rivers Coalition for many years. Ed and I, and sometimes just Ed, have been flying over, getting pictures of the estuary. It worked out a way this year that the releases started on March 6th, and we got the first pictures after that on the next day. After, we didn't even know. You like get home and it's like, we'll be starting to release tomorrow. I didn't know either. So we've been getting them weekly, which should give us a really good, the first time that we'll have it, if they keep dumping, getting pictures each week. And, weather dependent, we will be going up and documenting each week. And this should be helpful to see many things. Thanks. And it's on my blog. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jackie and Ed. And maybe we can get those photos to Todd, and Todd could put those in a sequence, weekly.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
because now
let's
they're
do
like
that.
separated. Okay.
Yeah, and Jackie, I think it'd be a good idea to have some coordinate dates when you're up there where I'll be on the ground. I make my trip support my ACOE to see for myself what's going on that western shoreline and then the C-44. So I'll be going out there probably once a week very soon for the rest of the summer.
Let's coordinate. Let's try to coordinate. It's usually
Let's do it.
a Saturday. We usually go
Yes.
Saturday and Sunday because they the Army Corps started dumping from Lake Okeechobee on Saturday. And
That's right.
so it's, if you can get in that range, it's a weekly checkup. So that would be great. Thank you. And you're doing a great job, Mike. And it's so sad about the manatees. I think about it at night. It makes me sick. Thank you.
Well, as we get into this new season too, remember the estuaries, the spawning grounds for not just oysters and growing for seagrass, but also for lots and lots of other fish and wildlife that depend on that spawning season and that balanced estuary. So we're really hesitant on the Corps having to keep dumping and have a long duration of fresh water in our conditions and in the estuary. So the sooner we can get those releases stopped so we can get the estuary back to a condition where it increases the spawning potentials in April and May. That's the best time of year for that. So we have a couple other quick comments and then we're going to wrap it up. I know Greg Braun, you had a quick update. We'll go then.
Yes.
Kelly
Thanks.
Dorr for a quick comment and then move on. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Mark. I did want to give a brief update on the Lacy Headwaters project. We continue to do outreach and fundraising for that land conservation initiative. We have crossed the $1.5 million threshold in donations to that program. But the biggest news, I'd say, is we gave a presentation 2 weeks ago to the Martin County Board of County Commissioners, where our project was unanimously supported by the county commission. And they were even looking bigger picture at the project being sort of a springboard for more dollars that could go for implementing IRL South land acquisition projects and other land conservation projects in the county. So we certainly appreciate that. And people can go to loxalucyheadwaters.org where we posted those additional letters of endorsement. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Kelly Dorr from the Everglades Law Center. Kelly.
Hi. So I'm here sort of split. I'm here as Kelly from the Everglades Law Center and Kelly as Jensen Beach resident and student in a master's program at UF. I wanted to share that we applied for a grant through ELC for a pilot summer project here in Martin County. And I'm looking for potential partners on this project. We got the grant, which was super exciting and kind of unexpected. It is an Everglades environmental advocacy and citizen activism program, and our hope is to engage Martin County students in local grassroots activism and advocacy as it relates to Everglades restoration and Martin County water. So I was hoping to catch Nick and Merritt to chat with them a little bit about this, but if anybody has any interest in partnering with me for this summer program, it is a pilot program, and if it goes well, hopefully we'll be able to continue it. I'd be super excited to talk to anyone and everyone about it. Yeah, so super exciting to get our students engaged in this work.
Great. Kelly, can you put your phone number on the chat?
Yep, absolutely. I'll put my phone number in my email.
There's some good information on the chat about some upcoming meetings as well. You know, some coming up. So be sure you look at the chat before you leave the meeting. That'll tell you some interesting connections there. I know even Savannah and Erica Scolti from the Corps put up the information about the C44 meeting coming up April 8th, and also there's comments the Corps is looking for on C23, C24 reservoir, which is in the St. Lucie watershed, as you know, and one of the projects, they're looking for comments on that. So she put the link to that in the chat as well. So the chat function here is a good way to post links and phone numbers and contact info. So please utilize that. I had a comment from Florida Oceanographic. Our board passed 3 resolutions this Monday at the meeting for Florida Oceanographic. One had to do with the EPA transfer of the 404 program to FDEP. The other had to do with advocating for support of the EEA reservoir project. We're sending that on to the state legislature, and also advocating for LOSOM, and particularly the LOSOM comment dealt with that option that we've been supporting as a Rivers Coalition, and that was the option, the 4C1 3307 22-448. The one with 0 discharges to the St. Lucie. So we passed resolutions supporting that. Other comments before we close? Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's participation, 50 plus, 60 plus participants. Rivers Coalition, our next meeting is Earth Day, April 22nd. Be sure to tune in for that. Stay tuned through Barbara if you have anything to get to Barbara Osborne at info@riverscoalition.org. So get that info to her. She will post things on her website, and our board will be meeting to go through programming and everything like that. We have some great campaigns coming up to kind of get this water right. So y'all stay tuned and check on the website. Yes, sir.
Mark, this is Drew Martin. I just wanted to mention to people.
Oh, Drew. Yeah.
Yes,
Go ahead,
there's
Drew.
a number of bills in the legislature that make it difficult to regulate carbon in the atmosphere, to take that away from the state agencies and put it in the hands of the legislature, and also to allow cities to have control. A number of preemption bills, so people should be just aware of what's going on in the legislature. We're in the midst of the legislative session.
That's good to know. Thanks. Stay tuned to that. Go on to the website to see, you know, contacting your state legislatures, either Florida Senate or the Florida House, and you can track the bills or look at what's going on and contact our local legislatures. There's a lot of things we got to do to continue that. So.
Right, and we're also trying to stop the funding for this MCORS, these 3 private roads that were passed a couple of years ago, but it really draws a lot of funds out of the projects we would rather be doing.
It also transcribes a lot of critical habitat for, you know, for bears and other habitat.
Right, and then there's also this bill that puts all the funding north of the lake, and I think that's problematic. As we talked about today, so people need to be aware of of that bill and how that will affect what people want to do south of the lake by putting all the funding north of the lake rather than doing something south of the lake to get water moving south.
Yeah, stay tuned. We're in the middle of the legislative session, which everybody knows started on March 2nd and will end on April 30th. And this is the time they're bringing bills from committees to the floor and voting on them. So stay tuned to that. Also, April 7th is Marjorie Stoneman Douglas' birthday. It was declared Everglades Day by the state legislature years ago. So we'll be celebrating Everglades Week that week. And the next Water Management District Governing Board is April 8th. So stay tuned to that as well. And as Tim Gysan mentioned, the PDT meeting is April 21st, the next LOSOM PDT meeting. All right. So I'd like to give us a close. Thanks, Richard, for your comment. It's a little bit more doing like few people are then studying. So a little less studying, a little more doing, I think is what his point is.
Hey, in the spirit of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, as she would say, keep being a nuisance.
Keep being
right.
Thank you, Army Corps, for your participation.
Yes, we appreciate that.
Yeah, we thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks again.
Good weekend.
Right. Have a good